Welcome back to Lena's Romantasy Collection, where the accidents are fated and the alphas are, well, usually obsessed. Quick question for the pack before we crash into today's story. Where are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments. And, since today's story features a corgi with zero survival instincts, drop a potato emoji if you have a chaos potato pet at home who thinks they are the alpha of your house. Today we have a special one. It's funny, it's spicy, and it involves a vintage VW Beetle, a homeless billionaire with amnesia, and a corgi named Mochi who decides to taste test the Alpha King's ankles. But before we start, if you want to support the channel and get early access to these fated mates, hit that join button down below. It helps us keep the lights on and the romance coming. Now, buckle up. The car is totaled, the king is confused, and the corgi is ready to attack. Let's read. Chapter 1. The rain in Oakhaven didn't just fall, it assaulted the earth. It hammered against the roof of my 1968 mint green Volkswagen Beetle, affectionately known as the Green Bean, drowning out the tinny 80s pop music struggling to survive through the radio static. "Mochi, stop it!" I scolded, glancing at the passenger seat. My corgi puppy, a fluffy loaf of chaotic energy, had managed to unearth a parking ticket from the glove box I swore I'd locked. He was currently shredding the evidence of my illegal parking with the enthusiasm of a tiny, furry lawnmower. "That is a legal document!" I reached over, taking one hand off the wheel to snatch the damp paper from his jaws. The steering wheel jerked. The Green Bean, notorious for its lack of power steering and questionable alignment, drifted slightly to the left. In that split second, a heartbeat, a blink, a shadow detached itself from the gloom of the crosswalk. I slammed on the brakes. The tires screamed, losing their grip on the slick cobblestones. The car didn't stop. It skidded, a terrifying, uncontrolled slide. Thud. The sound was sickening. It wasn't the metallic crunch of hitting a trash can. It was a dense, heavy impact. A body. "Oh God," I whispered, the air leaving my lungs like I'd been punched in the gut. The car stalled into silence, save for the aggressive drumming of the rain and Mochi's sudden, confused bark. I scrambled for the door handle, shoving it open with my shoulder. It always stuck in this weather, and practically fell out into the storm. "Sir, can you hear me?" My voice cracked. He was lying face down on the wet asphalt, a massive, dark shape illuminated by my headlights. He wasn't moving. Panic clawed at my throat. I was an interior designer. I fixed feng shui, not trauma victims. I knelt beside him, the cold water soaking instantly through my jeans. "Please don't be dead. Please don't be dead," I chanted, reaching out to touch his shoulder. He was huge. Even crumpled on the ground, his shoulders were broad enough to block out the headlights. Instinctively, I flared my nostrils, inhaling deeply to check his nature. In Oakhaven, you had to know if you were dealing with a wolf or a human. I expected the woodsy, spicy musk of an alpha. A man this size had to be one of us. But all I smelled was rain, wet asphalt, and soap. Sterile, generic soap. Human. He was human. "Oh no," I whispered, realizing the gravity of the situation. If he was human, he wouldn't heal. I had probably just killed him. Suddenly, he gasped. It was a ragged, wet sound, like a drowning man breaking the surface. Before I could recoil, a hand the size of a dinner plate shot out and clamped around my wrist. I shrieked, trying to yank back, but his grip was iron. It wasn't aggressive, though. It was desperate. He rolled over, his movements disjointed and heavy. His eyes flew open, and I froze. They weren't hazel or brown or blue. They were pitch black, the iris completely swallowed by the pupil. Mine, he rasped, the word vibrating in his chest. I'm calling an ambulance, I stammered, fumbling for my phone with my free hand. You're in shock. I hit you with my car. He didn't seem to hear me. He pulled me closer, his strength terrifyingly effortless for a human. I skidded on my knees, my face inches from his. He didn't look at my eyes. He buried his face into the crook of my neck, right where my pulse was hammering a frantic rhythm against my skin. He inhaled, a long, shuddering breath that sounded like he was starving and I was the first meal he'd seen in years. Sir, I yelped, trying to push against his chest. It was like pushing a brick wall. Personal space! You have a concussion! He growled, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through my own bones. Vanilla, he muttered, his voice thick and delirious. Rain. Mine. Then, as quickly as he had moved, his head lolled back. The tension left his body, and he slumped against the asphalt, unconscious, still gripping my wrist like it was a lifeline. Mochi barked from the car, a high-pitched sound of judgment. I stared at the unconscious giant in the rain, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had just flattened a man who had the grip of a werewolf but the scent of a human. And now, I had to figure out how to get him into the backseat of a Beetle before the police arrived. Chapter 2. The waiting room of Crestview Memorial Hospital smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. I hated it. It was a sterile purgatory where time seemed to stretch and warp. I sat on a plastic chair that was designed to be uncomfortable, shivering in my damp clothes. Mochi was in the car. Cracked window, blanket, strict instructions to be a good boy, which added a layer of guilt to my existing mountain of anxiety. Ms. Reed? I jumped, my planner sliding off my lap. A nurse with tired eyes beckoned me over. The John Doe you brought in, he's awake. Is he okay? I asked, clutching my purse strap. I mean, I really hit him. He flew, and he's human, right? So he won't just walk it off. The nurse gave me a strange look. His file says no ID, so we don't have medical history. But yes, physiologically he appears human, though his density, well, he's a big guy. She frowned at her clipboard. He has some bruising, 3 fractured ribs, and a nasty concussion. But honestly, his vitals are bizarre. His heart rate is incredibly slow, then spikes whenever we try to sedate him. He's agitated. He keeps asking for the smell. The smell? I repeated. He's disoriented. Dr. Thorne is with him now. I followed her down the hallway, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. We stopped at room 304. The door was open, and the tension inside was palpable. The man, Lachlan, though I didn't know his name yet, was sitting up in the hospital bed. He looked ludicrously out of place. The bed was too small for him. His feet hung off the end, and his shoulders looked like they might burst the seams of the flimsy hospital gown. A doctor with silver-rimmed glasses and a sharp jawline was shining a light into his eyes. This was Dr. Thorne. I knew Thorne. He was a wolf doctor, usually reserved for pack business. Why was he attending to a human? I can't see properly, the man growled, pushing the doctor's hand away. His voice was deep, rough like gravel tumbling down a hill. Everything is gray, tasteless. You have a concussion, Dr. Thorne said smoothly, though I noticed his hand was shaking slightly. Then the man turned his head. He couldn't possibly have seen me. I was standing in the shadows of the doorway, but his nostrils flared. Her, he breathed. The change in him was instantaneous. The tension in his jaw uncoiled. The frantic, wild look in his black eyes softened into something heavy and focused. He tried to swing his legs out of bed. "Whoa, easy!" Dr. Thorne stepped in front of him. "You have broken ribs." "I don't care," the man grunted. He looked at me, his gaze piercing. It felt like he was looking right through my clothes, through my skin, and staring at my soul. "You stayed." Well, yes." I stepped into the room, raising my hands in a placating gesture. "Accountability. I hit you. I can't just dump you on the curb." He blinked, looking confused by the word accountability. He looked down at his hands, then back at me. "The gray is gone," he whispered, mostly to himself. "I can smell the iodine now." Dr. Thorne shot me a sharp, unreadable look before turning back to his patient. "Sir, can you tell us your name? Do you know where you are?" The man froze. I watched a muscle feather in his jaw. He looked at the doctor, then at me. I saw a flicker of something calculated in his eyes, a hesitation that didn't feel like confusion. It felt like a decision. He slumped back against the pillows, wincing as his ribs protested. He looked at me with the expression of a lost, kicked puppy that rivaled Mochi's best begging face. "I don't know," he lied. "I don't remember anything." Chapter 3. Dissociative Fugue, Dr. Thorne announced 10 minutes later. We were standing in the hallway. The door to room 304 was closed, but I could feel the man's presence on the other side like a gravitational pull. "Amnesia?" I clarified, feeling the weight of the situation settle on my shoulders like a boulder. "Because I hit him?" "Trauma can trigger it," Dr. Thorne said smoothly. Too smoothly. He adjusted his glasses. "Physically, he is remarkably resilient. His ribs are already stabilizing, which is fortunate. But mentally, he is a blank slate. We found no wallet, no phone, no ID on him." I rubbed my temples. "So what happens now? You call the police? Social services?" "Usually, yes," Thorne said. "But the shelters are full due to the storm damage downtown. And the police?" He trailed off. "If we turn him over to the state without a name, he'll get lost in the system. He seems agitated when you aren't near him, Miss Reed. His heart rate drops only when you're in the room." I stared at the doctor. "You cannot be suggesting what I think you're suggesting." "I'm suggesting he needs a place to recover for a day or two until his memory triggers. He clearly feels safe with you." "I ran him over," I hissed, keeping my voice low. "That is the opposite of safe. And he's huge, doctor. I'm a single woman living in a third-floor walk-up. I can't just take home a strange man." "He has no scent," Thorne said quietly, knowing exactly what I was worried about. "He isn't one of us, Talia. He's just a man who got hit by a car and lost his memory." I looked through the small glass window of the door. The man was sitting there, staring at his hands. He looked lonely. Desolation radiated from him, a palpable aura of isolation that tugged at the hollow ache in my own chest. I knew what it felt like to have no one, to be abandoned when things got hard. My conscience, that traitorous thing, kicked me hard. "Fine," I groaned, pulling my keys out of my pocket. 2 days. If he doesn't remember who he is by Thursday, I'm driving him to the police station myself. Getting him discharged was a nightmare of paperwork. Getting him into the Green Bean was a comedy of errors. It had stopped raining, leaving the air damp and cold. I walked into the car, Mochi barking excitedly from the dashboard. The man, I decided to call him John in my head, stared at the Volkswagen with deep skepticism. "It's small," he stated. "It's vintage," I corrected, opening the passenger door. "Get in, mind your head, and your legs, and just everything." He tried, he really did, but watching a 6'4" wall of muscle try to fold himself into a compact car was like watching someone try to stuff a grizzly bear into a suitcase. His knees hit the dashboard, his head brushed the ceiling liner. He had to hunch forward, looking miserable. Mochi, having zero sense of self-preservation, immediately hopped from the back seat onto the man's lap and licked his chin. I expected him to recoil. Instead, the man froze. He looked down at the puppy, his expression shifting from stoic pain to pure bewilderment. He carefully, almost reverently, lifted a massive hand and touched Mochi's ear. "Dog," he said deeply. "Yes, that's Mochi," I sighed, starting the engine. It sputtered once before roaring to life. "Buckle up, John Doe. You're going home with the woman who flattened you." Chapter 4. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up building in the older part of Oakhaven. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I had exposed brick walls, a jungle of houseplants I was desperately trying to keep alive, and eclectic furniture I'd restored myself. It was cozy. It was safe. And suddenly, with him standing in my entryway, it felt incredibly tiny. He had to duck to get through the doorframe. Once inside, he stood in the middle of my living room rug like an invasive species, looking around with wide, scanning eyes. He seemed to fill the entire space. The air in the room suddenly felt thinner, charged with static electricity. "This is it," I said, tossing my keys into the ceramic bowl by the door. "Bathroom is down the hall. Kitchen is there. Please don't break anything. Most of this furniture is older than both of us." He nodded stiffly. He looked pale. The adrenaline from the accident was wearing off, and the reality of his injuries was kicking in. He swayed slightly on his feet. "Food," he rasped. It wasn't a request, it was a biological imperative. "Hungry?" I asked, taking off my coat. "I can make some toast or—" "Meat," he interrupted. He looked at my fridge with an intensity usually reserved for lovers or enemies. "Okay, demanding," I muttered, walking to the kitchen. "I think I have some leftover roast beef from the deli." I barely got the package open before he was there. He didn't snatch it, but the speed at which he consumed the cold cuts was alarming. He ate like he hadn't seen food in a week. Within minutes, he had decimated my weekly supply of ham, cheese, and a slightly stale loaf of bread. "Better?" I asked, leaning against the counter, watching him wipe a crumb from his lip. He blinked, seeming to realize what he'd done. A flush of what looked like embarrassment crept up his neck. He looked down at his feet. Mochi was currently attacking his shoelaces, growling ferociously at the aglet. "Sorry," he mumbled. His voice was quieter now, the gravel smoothing out into a deep baritone. He looked at Mochi, then back at me, unable to hold my gaze for more than a second. "Thank you for the food." "You're welcome," I said, softening slightly. "Though I have to admit, your metabolism is terrifying. Are you sure you're not an Olympic athlete or something? I've never seen a human eat like that." He stiffened, just for a second, before forcing his shoulders to relax. I was very hungry. Clearly. I pointed to my velvet emerald sofa. It was long, but probably still too short for him. "You can take the couch. I'll get you some blankets." I went to the linen closet, grabbing a duvet and a pillow. When I came back, he was standing by the window, looking out at the streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement. He looked lost. "Here," I said, handing him the bedding. He took it, his fingers brushing against mine. A spark, literal static shock, zapped us both. I jumped back. He didn't flinch. He just inhaled sharply, his chest expanding. "Sleep," I ordered, trying to ignore the way my heart had skipped a beat. "We'll figure out who you are in the morning." I retreated to my bedroom and locked the door. I leaned against it, sliding down until I hit the floor. Mochi scratched at the wood from the other side, having betrayed me to sleep with the giant on the couch. I sniffed the air one last time. Still nothing. Just soap and rain. He's just a man, I told myself. A giant, hungry, static-charged man. But as I closed my eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just invited something wild into my home. Chapter 5. Sunlight hit my eyelids like a sledgehammer. I groaned, rolling over in my bed and instantly regretting it as my neck cracked in protest. The adrenaline from the accident had evaporated during the night, leaving behind a residue of exhaustion and a distinct nagging headache. Then, memory crashed into me. The rain, the green bean skidding, the giant man with the black eyes. I sat up so fast the room spun. Oh God, I have a stranger in my living room. I scrambled out of bed, grabbing my robe and cinching it tight like armor. I didn't own a weapon, but I did have a heavy canister of dry shampoo on my dresser. I grabbed it, better than nothing, and crept toward the bedroom door. The apartment was quiet. Suspiciously quiet. Mochi wasn't barking, which usually meant he was either asleep or destroying something expensive. I opened the door and peeked into the living area. The emerald velvet sofa was empty. The duvet I'd given him was folded with military precision, stacked neatly with the pillow on the armrest. "John?" I called out softly, my grip on the dry shampoo tightening. "Here." The voice came from the kitchen. It was deep, resonating through the floorboards like a cello string. I rounded the corner and froze. He was standing by the sink, and he was shirtless. My brain short-circuited. John Doe was built like a fortress. His back was a landscape of muscle that shifted as he moved, and the pale, jagged scar I'd seen on his collarbone continued over his shoulder, disappearing down his spine. He was wearing his jeans from the night before, stiff with dried mud and looking uncomfortably tight, but his t-shirt was draped over a chair, clearly too wet or dirty to wear. He was holding a wrench I didn't know I owned. "The faucet," he rumbled, turning to face me. He didn't smile. His face was stoic, his jaw set in a hard line. "It was dripping. The rhythm. It was annoying." I stared at the faucet. It had been dripping for 3 years. I had learned to live with it, like a bad roommate. Now, it was silent. "You fixed it?" I asked, lowering the dry shampoo. "Yes." He set the wrench down. His gaze dropped to the floor, avoiding my eyes. "I couldn't sleep." "The sofa is compact." "It's a standard love seat," I defended weakly, trying not to stare at his abs. "You're just gargantuan." He shifted his weight, and I heard his stomach growl. It wasn't a normal hunger pang. It sounded like a tectonic plate shifting. "I found these," he said, gesturing to the counter. My heart sank. There lay the empty wrappers of 3 protein bars, a box of crackers, and, tragically, my emergency stash of dark chocolate. "I needed fuel," he said, and for the first time, he looked genuinely apologetic. "My ribs, they itch." "Itch?" I frowned, stepping closer. I looked at his torso. The bruising from the accident, which had been a terrifying shade of purple last night, had faded to a dull yellow. That wasn't possible. Bruises like that took weeks to heal, not hours. "You heal fast," I whispered, my interior designer brain trying to find a logical schematic for this and failing. "Humans don't heal that fast, John. Are you sure you aren't—" I stopped. I didn't want to say the word wolf. If he was human, he wouldn't know about the supernatural world. "I have a fast metabolism," he muttered, turning back to the sink to wash his hands. The water rushed over his massive knuckles. Mochi trotted out from behind the kitchen island, looking betrayingly happy. He sat at the man's feet and let out a small woof. "He likes you," I noted, feeling a weird pang of jealousy. "He usually eats the ankles of men he doesn't know." "He knows I'm not a threat," the man said quietly. He turned off the tap, no drip, and finally looked at me. His eyes were dark, intense, and filled with a strange kind of desperation. "I need clothes, Talia. I cannot wear this crust." He gestured to his stiff jeans. I blinked. "Right, clothes. And food. Real food, apparently, since you ate my entire pantry." I sighed, mentally calculating the balance on my credit card. It wasn't pretty. But accountability was my creed. I broke him. I had to fix him. "Okay," I said, putting on my let's get business done voice. "I have to work for a few hours, but then we'll go out. Please tell me you don't have any dietary restrictions besides everything in sight." He looked at me, dead serious. "Meat. Rare." Chapter 6. I couldn't afford to take the day off. Freelance interior design sounded glamorous, but in reality, it meant if I didn't work, I didn't eat. And now I had 2 mouths to feed, 3 counting Mochi. I set up my laptop on the small dining table, trying to ignore the massive presence occupying my living room. "I have a Zoom meeting with a client," I warned him, adjusting my webcam. "Stay out of the frame. Do not make noise. Do not eat the furniture." He was sitting on the emerald sofa again, looking like a king on a throne made for a child. His knees were practically in his chest. Understood. I dove into work. My client, Mrs. Gable, was indecisive about beige swatches. "No, Talia, I need sand beige, not fawn beige," she shrilled through the speakers. "Of course, Mrs. Gable," I said, pasting on my polite smile. "The lighting in your foyer will really change the undertone." Behind the laptop, chaos was brewing. I watched from the corner of my eye as Mochi dragged his favorite squeaky toy, a rubber chicken, and dropped it on the man's foot. "Squeak!" The man stared at it. He poked it with one finger. "Squeak!" He looked delighted. It was a micro-expression, gone in a flash, but I saw it. The stoic, terrifying giant was amused by a rubber chicken. 10 minutes later, I heard a low, ominous hum. I muted my microphone. "What are you doing?" I hissed. He was standing in front of my television, holding the remote like it was an alien artifact. I pressed the red button. "That's power," I whispered, glancing back at the screen to make sure Mrs. Gable was still monologuing about curtains. The TV flickered to life. A daytime soap opera filled the screen, a dramatic close-up of a woman slapping a man while organ music swelled. He was transfixed. He sat back down, eyes glued to the screen. I went back to my meeting. "Yes, Mrs. Gable, sheer genius." For the next 2 hours, the only sounds in the apartment were my typing, Mrs. Gable's complaints, and the muted drama of the restless and the rich. When I finally closed my laptop, draining the last of my coffee, I turned to check on him. He looked devastated. "What's wrong?" I asked, alarmed. "Are you in pain? Your ribs?" He pointed at the TV. "Rodrigo betrayed Maria. He is not the father of the twins." I stared at him. "You're invested?" "It is illogical," he growled, crossing his arms over his bare chest. "He sensed her lie in episode 1. Why did he wait until the wedding to confront her? It shows poor leadership." I couldn't help it. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, escaping before I could clamp a hand over my mouth. It wasn't a polite chuckle. It was a snort. His head snapped toward me. For a second, I thought he'd be offended, but his nostrils flared and his eyes dilated, the black expanding to swallow the iris again. He looked at me like I was the only thing in the room that was in color. "You laughed," he said softly. "You're ridiculous," I countered, feeling a flush heat my cheeks. "Come on, let's go get you some clothes before you start analyzing the geopolitical implications of The Price is Right." He stood up, unfolding his massive frame. The air in the room shifted, becoming heavier, charged with that static again. "Talia," he said. "Yeah?" "I am hungry." I grabbed my purse, checking the limit on my visa. "I know, big guy. I know." Chapter 7. The grocery store was a sensory nightmare. The fluorescent lights buzzed with an angry hum, and the air smelled of floor wax and stale popcorn. "Stay close," I muttered to him. He was wearing one of my oversized hoodies, a dark gray one that usually reached my knees. On him, it was a crop top. It was tied across his shoulders and barely covered his stomach, leaving a strip of muscular skin visible every time he reached for something. He still wore the muddy jeans. He looked like a deranged, incredibly attractive hobo. "People are staring," he noted, scanning the perimeter of the produce section like he was guarding the president. "Because you look like you just escaped a fight club," I whispered, tossing a bag of apples into the cart. "I need protein," he reminded me, bypassing the apples and heading straight for the butcher counter. He didn't just pick up a steak. He picked up 6 steaks. And a family pack of chicken thighs. And a log of ground beef. "Put half of that back," I hissed, grabbing his arm. His bicep was rock hard under the hoodie. "I am not a millionaire, John." "I will repay you," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "I am capable of labor." "Great. You can mow my non-existent lawn." We compromised on 3 steaks and the chicken. As we turned down the frozen aisle to get peas, for mochi, the air grew colder. A man was blocking the aisle. He was wearing a cheap suit and talking loudly on his phone. He glanced at me, his eyes raking down my body in a way that made my skin crawl. He didn't move his cart. "Excuse me," I said politely, trying to squeeze past. "In a rush, sweetheart?" The guy smirked, ending his call. He stepped into my space, ignoring the giant looming behind me. "You know, you have beautiful eyes. Maybe you should ditch the homeless guy and let me buy you a drink." I stiffened. My customer service smile vanished. "No, thank you. Please move." "Feisty," he laughed, reaching out to touch my arm. The reaction was instantaneous. A sound vibrated through the aisle. It wasn't human. It was a low, guttural growl that sounded like a tectonic plate grinding against bedrock. It was so deep, I felt it in the soles of my feet. Zzzt. Above us, the row of fluorescent lights flickered violently. 2 bulbs at the far end of the aisle popped with a loud crack, showering glass onto the linoleum. The guy in the suit jumped back, his face draining of color. He looked at John. John wasn't looking at the lights. He was looking at the man's hand, the one that had almost touched me. His upper lip curled back just a fraction, revealing teeth that looked sharper than they had any right to be. His eyes were pitch black. The air around us dropped 10 degrees. The freezer units began to hum aggressively, the glass doors rattling in their frames. "Leave," John said. One word. It sounded like a death sentence. The guy didn't argue. He didn't even grab his cart. He turned and sprinted toward the checkout, nearly slipping on the floor wax. I stood there, heart hammering against my ribs, staring at the man I had brought into my home. My Omega instincts were screaming alpha. The growl, the dominance, the electricity, it was all there. I inhaled sharply, searching for the scent. I waited for the cedar, the musk, the spice. But there was nothing. Just the scent of static electricity and the soap I washed my hoodie in. What is he? My mind raced. He had the strength of an alpha, the growl of a wolf, but the scent of a human. Was he a latent? Someone with the genetics but not the shift? Or just a biological anomaly? He turned to me. The black faded from his eyes, replaced by a look of sheer panic. He looked at the shattered bulbs on the floor, then at his own hands. He started. "Car," I said, my voice shaking. "Now." Chapter 8. I drove the green bean like a getaway driver. Mochi, sensing the mood, was silent in the back seat. Beside me, the man was curled into a ball, staring out the window, his hand gripping the "oh shit" handle so hard the plastic was creaking. We didn't speak until we were parked in my alleyway. The rain had started again, a light drizzle that blurred the windshield. "What was that?" I asked, turning to him. I kept my hand near the door handle. "I don't know," he said. His voice was rough. "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "You growled. Like a bear. And the lights? The freezer doors? That wasn't a coincidence." He took a deep breath. The scent of petrichor filled the car as he rolled down the window slightly. He looked at me, and the vulnerability in his expression stopped me cold. "I felt protective," he said slowly, testing the word. "He was a threat. He was going to touch you." My body reacted before my mind did. "So you're telekinetic when you're angry?" I asked, skepticism dripping from my tone. "I think..." He paused, rubbing his temple. "I think the accident did something to my wiring. The doctor said my vitals were bizarre. Maybe it's electric." It was a flimsy excuse, a terrible lie, but looking at him, huge, scarred, wearing my tiny hoodie, and looking absolutely terrified that I was going to kick him out, I faltered. My nose twitched again. Still no alpha scent. If he was a wolf, he was the strangest one I'd ever met. A latent with electrical issues? It was the only logical explanation. I remembered the way he had stepped between me and the creep. I remembered the feeling of safety that had washed over me the moment he growled. I had spent my whole life being the independent one, the one who handled the bills, the clients, the heartbreak. No one had ever scared away the monsters for me. "You can't just go around blowing up light bulbs because someone hits on me," I said, my voice softer now. "I can handle myself." "I know," he said, and he sounded sincere. "You are fierce, Talia, but..." He looked down at his hands. "I didn't want him near you." My heart did that traitorous flutter again. "Okay," I exhaled, leaning my head back against the seat. "Okay, we'll add electrical interference to the list of symptoms. But if you fry my toaster, you're paying for it." He cracked a small smile, the first real one I'd seen. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less like a war-torn statue. "Deal." "Come on," I said, opening my door. "Let's go cook those steaks before you eat the leather upholstery." We walked up the 3 flights of stairs in silence, but the dynamic had shifted. He wasn't just a burden I was accountable for anymore. He was a mystery, a dangerous, electrical, protective mystery. And as I unlocked the door, I realized with a jolt of panic that I wasn't scared of him. I was scared of how much I wanted him to stay. Chapter 9. The rhythmic thumping of my washing machine was the only sound in the apartment. I had finally bullied John into relinquishing his mud-caked jeans, leaving him with nothing but a towel I'd thrown at him and the emerald velvet sofa. "It is breezy," he had complained, clutching the towel around his waist like a dignity shield. Now, at 3 a.m., the apartment was silent. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a heavy, humid stillness that pressed against the windows. I was in my bedroom, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My mind kept replaying the grocery store incident, the growl, the popping lights, the absolute lack of alpha scent. He has to be a latent, I reasoned, tracing a crack in the plaster with my eyes. A genetic anomaly. All the aggression of a wolf, but none of the biology. That explains the electrical surges. His wiring is faulty. A sudden, strangled noise from the living room shattered my thoughts. "No, flank left, incoming." It was a shout, raw and terrified. I threw off my covers and rushed to the door. Mochi was already there, whining and scratching at the wood. I opened it and sprinted to the living area. Lachlan, John, was thrashing. The duvet was tangled around his legs, and his massive chest was heaving, slick with sweat. In the moonlight, the scar on his shoulder looked angry and white. He punched the air, a visceral, violent motion that would have taken someone's head off. "Traitor!" he roared, the word tearing from his throat. He was having a night terror, a bad one. "John!" I reached out, grabbing his shoulder to shake him awake. "Wake up! You're safe!" Big mistake. His instincts were faster than his consciousness. Before I could blink, a hand clamped around my wrist. In a blur of motion, he flipped us. Suddenly, I was pressed into the velvet cushions of the sofa, and he was hovering over me, his forearm bracing his weight so he didn't crush me. His eyes were wide open, and they were blown black. "Target acquired," he snarled, baring his teeth. I froze. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. He looked lethal, terrifying. "John!" I gasped, tapping his arm. "It's Talia! You're in my apartment! Look at me!" He blinked. The black receded slowly, like ink draining from water, revealing his confused, dark irises. He looked down at his hand on my wrist, then at my face. Horror washed over him. He scrambled back, falling off the sofa and crashing onto the hardwood floor with a heavy thud, clutching the towel to ensure it stayed in place. "Talia," he choked out, backing away until he hit the TV stand. He was shaking. I didn't... "You were dreaming," I said, my voice trembling. I sat up, rubbing my wrist. He hadn't hurt me, but the speed, that wasn't human speed. And yet, when I inhaled, I smelled nothing but sweat and the sharp, metallic tang of static electricity. "I thought I was back in the..." He stopped. He ran a hand over his face, wiping away the sweat. "I have vivid dreams. From the accident, I assume." I looked at him. He was huddled on my floor, a giant of a man reduced to a trembling mess. "That wasn't just a dream," I whispered, sliding off the couch to sit on the floor opposite him, keeping a safe distance. "You moved like a soldier, John. You were shouting about flanking." He stiffened. "I watch a lot of action movies." "Right. I said, not buying it for a second. And the static? The way my hair is currently standing on end just being near you? He looked at me, his expression unreadable. I told you, my wiring is bad. Your wiring is dangerous, I corrected softly. But you stopped. You recognized me. He looked at his hands, clenching and unclenching them. I would never hurt you, Talia. Even in a nightmare, you are the anchor. Chapter 10. The next morning, the tension in the apartment was thick enough to cut with a knife. We didn't talk about the nightmare. We didn't talk about the fact that I was now 99% sure he was a latent with PTSD. I decided to test him. I need to go over the contract for the pack house renovation, I said casually, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. I handed him one. He was wearing his jeans again, clean now, thanks to my washer, and the gray crop top hoodie. It was a look. Lachlan froze mid-sip. Pack house? Yeah, the ironclad pack. You know them? I read the name on a folder on your desk. Right. Well, they're picky. The Alpha King is apparently a recluse. Rumor has it he's incompetent and lets his betas run everything while he drinks expensive scotch in a dungeon. I took a sip of coffee, lying through my teeth. The rumors actually said he was a war hero, but I wanted a reaction. That is erroneous, Lachlan snapped. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? And how would John Doe with amnesia know the management style of the Alpha King? He paled. He realized his mistake instantly. He set the mug down, his fingers gripping the ceramic so hard I worried it would shatter. Logic, he recovered, though his voice was tight. If the Alpha were incompetent, the ironclad sector would be an economic ruin. Instead, their infrastructure is robust, and their crime rates are the lowest in the city. A negligent leader cannot maintain such homeostasis. I stared at him. Homeostasis? You speak very eloquently for a guy who eats raw hamburger meat, I noted dryly. Infrastructure? Erroneous? Homeostasis? Who are you, John? A professor of werewolf economics? I read the newspaper, he muttered, standing up abruptly. While you were sleeping. I have good retention. The newspaper doesn't cover PAC internal affairs, I pressed, leaning against the counter. Are you a spy? Is that why you have no ID? I am not a spy, he growled. The lights in the kitchen flickered. Zzz, pop. Stop doing that! I pointed at the ceiling fixture. You're going to blow the fuse box, and I don't know how to fix it. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes. The flickering stopped. When he opened them, the panic was gone, replaced by that stoic mask. I am not a spy, Talia. I am just a man who knows that rumors are rarely factual. Now, are we going to cook the meat? My metabolism is demanding restitution. I sighed, shaking my head. He was hiding something massive. But looking at the way his hands shook slightly, a remnant of the nightmare, I couldn't bring myself to push him out the door. Fine, I said. But if you correct my grammar again, you're sleeping in the bathtub. Chapter 11. By evening, the apartment smelled distinctively of searing meat and garlic. It was a domestic scene that felt dangerously comfortable. I am not eating charcoal, Lachlan announced, hovering over my shoulder as I flipped the steaks in the cast-iron skillet. It's called medium rare, John. It means it's cooked, I countered, dodging his massive arm. You can't just eat a warm cow. You'll get salmonella, or E. coli, whichever one cows have. I have a robust immune system, he argued, eyeing the steak with predatory focus. Blue. I want it blue. You're disgusting, I laughed, plating his steak while it was essentially still mooing. I cooked mine to a respectable medium. We sat at the small dining table. I had lit a candle, mostly to hide the smell of the wet dog, as Mochu was currently drying off under the table. But it added an unintentional romantic ambiance. Lachlan didn't use a knife. He cut the steak with his fork, pressing down with enough force to dent the table, and ate with a speed that was both terrifying and impressive. "Slow down," I said, sipping my wine. "No one is going to steal it." "Habit," he murmured, swallowing a massive bite. He looked at me, his dark eyes catching the candlelight. "This is adequate. Thank you." "High praise from the man who ate my deli meat straight from the package," I teased. He smiled. It was a small, ephemeral thing, but it made my breath hitch. "You have been generous. Most people would have left me on the road." "I couldn't," I admitted, looking down at my plate. "I know what it's like to be left behind. My old pack, they didn't like that I was too traditional about mates. They wanted me to date around, climb the social ladder. When I refused, they cut me loose." Lachlan went still. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with that familiar static. "They abandoned you? For being loyal?" "For being an Omega who wanted a fated mate," I corrected, shrugging. "It's stupid. I know fated mates are rare, but I couldn't settle." Lachlan reached across the table. His hand hovered over mine, heat radiating from his palm. "It is not stupid, Talia. It is rare and valuable." For a second, I thought he was going to touch me. I wanted him to. My skin prickled with anticipation, the hair on my arms standing up. Crack! The radio on the counter, which had been playing soft jazz, suddenly shrieked with high-pitched static. The volume knob turned itself all the way up, blasting white noise at a deafening volume. I jumped, knocking my knee against the table. Lachlan pulled his hand back as if burned. "Sorry," he grunted, the static dying down instantly as he clenched his fists. "I lost focus." I stared at the radio, then at him. "You really need to get that checked out, John. You're a walking fire hazard." Chapter 12. Later that night, the rain returned, lashing against the windows and sheets. I had gone to bed early, exhausted by the emotional roller coaster of the day. Lachlan sat on the emerald sofa, staring at the door. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. He sensed it before he heard it. A shift in the air pressure. A scent that wasn't rain or asphalt. Wolf. Someone was in the hallway outside the apartment. Lachlan moved. He didn't make a sound. He stood up from the couch with the grace of a phantom, moving toward the door. He checked the bedroom. Talia was asleep, her breathing steady. Good. He opened the apartment door and slipped into the hallway, closing it silently behind him. A man was standing at the top of the stairs. He wore a black raincoat, and the insignia of the ironclad pack was hidden, badly, under his lapel. A tracker. "Alpha," the tracker whispered, bowing his head low. "We found you. The beta is frantic. The council is—" "Silence," Lachlan ordered, his voice a low growl that didn't carry past the stairwell. "Why are you here?" "To bring you home, my king. You have been missing for 3 days. We tracked your phone signal before it died." The tracker looked at the door to Talia's apartment. "Is that an Omega?" "Sir, you are injured." "Let me—" "You will leave," Lachlan said, stepping forward. The hallway light flickered ominously. You will tell no one where I am." "Sir, I can't do that," the tracker said, straightening up. "Protocol dictates—" Lachlan moved. He didn't shift. He didn't need to. He closed the distance in a heartbeat, slamming the tracker against the brick wall. His forearm pressed against the man's windpipe, cutting off his protest. "Protocol," Lachlan hissed, his eyes bleeding black, "does not apply when I am protecting my mate." The tracker's eyes went wide. "Mate? But sir, she's—" "She is mine," Lachlan snarled. "And if you bring the council's politics to her doorstep, I will rip your throat out with my human teeth. Do you understand?" The tracker nodded frantically, gasping for air. Lachlan released him. The tracker slid to the floor, coughing. "Go," Lachlan commanded. "Tell the beta I am conducting a covert operation. I will return when I am ready." The tracker scrambled down the stairs, slipping on the wet steps in his haste to get away from the feral king. Lachlan stood in the hallway for a moment, waiting for his heart rate to slow, waiting for the black to fade from his vision. He looked down at his knuckles. They were white from the strain. He turned back to the apartment door. He had bought himself time, but not much. He slipped back inside, locking the deadbolt. "John?" He froze. Talia was standing in the doorway of her bedroom, rubbing her eyes. She looked soft, sleepy, and beautiful. "Where were you?" she asked, yawning. "I thought I heard the wind," he lied, his voice rough. "Just checking the lock." "You're paranoid," she mumbled, turning back to bed. "Come to sleep. The couch looks lonely." Lachlan stared at her retreating back. The guilt hit him harder than the car had. He was lying to her, and every moment he stayed, he was putting a target on her back. Chapter 13. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting stripes of light across the living room floor. I found Lachlan sitting on the emerald sofa, his posture rigid. He was staring at his hands, his expression dark and contemplative. "Coffee," I announced, placing a steaming mug on the coaster beside him. "You look like you fought a war in your sleep." He flinched, snapping out of his trance. "Just restless. The couch has compromised lumbar support." "It's vintage," I defended, sipping my own brew. "It chooses aesthetics over comfort. It's a design choice." He moved to pick up the mug, and I saw it. A fresh, dark bruise blooming across his knuckles. It was an ugly shade of purple, stark against his tan skin. "What happened to your hand?" I asked, putting my mug down and reaching for his wrist. He tried to pull away, but I was faster. I turned his hand over. The knuckles were raw, the skin split slightly as if he'd punched a brick wall. "I hit the doorframe," he lied. His voice was flat. "In the dark. My spatial awareness is still calibrating." "You hit a doorframe?" I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "With enough force to bruise bone? What is the doorframe made of, John? Adamantium?" "It was a very sturdy frame," he muttered, refusing to meet my eyes. "Sit," I ordered, pointing to the sofa. "I'm getting the first aid kit. Again." He sat obediently, though he looked like a chastised schoolboy. When I returned with the kit, I sat on the coffee table in front of him, my knees brushing against his jeans. The contact sent a little jolt of static through me, that familiar metallic buzz that I had come to associate with him. "This doesn't make sense," I murmured, dabbing antiseptic on the cut. "You heal broken ribs in a day, but a bruised knuckle sticks around? Your biology is a mess." "It is selective," he rasped. I looked up. He was watching me. His black eyes were intense, focused entirely on my face. The air between us grew heavy, charged with an invisible current. I could feel the heat radiating off him, a furnace that warmed the cool morning air. "You need to be more careful," I whispered, applying a bandage. "I can't keep patching you up. I'm an interior designer, not a mechanic for whatever you are." He leaned in, just an inch. "And what do you think I am, Talia?" My breath hitched. I searched his face, the sharp jawline, the stoic mouth, the eyes that held 1,000 secrets. "I think you're trouble," I said softly. "I think you're a latent, with a short fuse and too much electricity in his veins. And I think you're lying about the door frame." He didn't deny it. He just looked at my mouth, his gaze dropping for a fraction of a second before snapping back to my eyes. The tension was palpable, a physical weight pressing down on us. "Trouble," he repeated, testing the word. "Perhaps. But I am the kind of trouble that would burn the world down to keep you warm." My heart did a traitorous flip. That was undeniably poetic for a man wearing a crop-top hoodie. Chapter 14. The tender moment was shattered by a sharp, aggressive knock at the door. Mochi, who had been sleeping under the armchair, erupted into a frenzy of barks. Lachlan's demeanor shifted instantly. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by that cold, lethal stillness I had seen in the grocery store. He stood up, placing himself between me and the door. "Expecting anyone?" he asked, his voice low. "No," I frowned, checking my watch. "It's Friday. Unless Mrs. Gable has had a beige-related emergency." I walked to the door, peering through the peephole. My stomach dropped. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," I groaned. "Who is it?" Lachlan demanded. The lights in the hallway flickered. Zzzt. "Ethan," I whispered, unlocking the deadbolt against my better judgment. "My ex." I opened the door. Ethan stood there, leaning against the frame with a practiced smirk. He was a classic alpha, handsome in a generic way, with blonde hair that was perfectly styled and a suit that screamed of exorbitant wealth. He smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. "Talia," he purred, looking me up and down. "You're looking rustic." "Ethan," I said, using my customer service voice, "to what do I owe the displeasure?" "Is that any way to greet an old friend?" He tried to step inside. "We aren't friends," I blocked him. "You made that very clear when you kicked me out of the pack for being antiquated baggage." Ethan laughed, a dismissive sound. "Water under the bridge, babe. Look, I have a proposition. The pack needs a new event planner for the Solstice Gala. I told the Alpha I knew someone cheap and desperate." My jaw dropped. "Get out!" "Come on." Ethan pushed past me, ignoring my protest. "Don't be like that. I know you're struggling. You always were too proud for your own good. Just take the job. Let me buy you dinner, and maybe we can—" He stopped dead. He had walked into the living room and come face to chest with Lachlan. Lachlan wasn't doing anything. He was just standing there, arms crossed over the gray hoodie that was 2 sizes too small. But the air around him was vibrating. The lamp in the corner was buzzing like a trapped hornet. Ethan looked up and up. His smirk faltered. "Who the hell is this?" Ethan demanded, his voice pitching higher. "Your bodyguard?" Lachlan didn't blink. He looked at Ethan with the detached disinterest of a lion looking at a particularly annoying mouse. "I am her guest," Lachlan said. His voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made the floorboards tremble. "And you are intruding." Ethan sneered, trying to regain his composure. He sniffed the air. A human? You replaced me with a human? Seriously, Talia. I knew you were desperate, but this is pathetic. He smells like dryer sheets. Lachlan tilted his head. And you smell like insecurity and cheap musk. Chapter 15. Ethan bristled, his alpha instincts flaring. Watch your mouth, human. You have no idea who you're talking to. I am talking to a liability, Lachlan said smoothly. He took a step forward. Ethan took a step back. You entered this domicile without invitation. You insulted the homeowner. And now, you are attempting to solicit services she clearly has no interest in providing. It's a job offer, Ethan shouted, looking at me for support. Talia, tell your pet giant to back off. He's not my pet, I said, crossing my arms. And he's right. You called me cheap and desperate. That's not a job offer, Ethan. That's an insult wrapped in a paycheck. She needs the money, Ethan scoffed. She's an Omega without a pack. She's practically destitute. Lachlan's eyes narrowed. The static in the room spiked. The broken radio on the counter suddenly crackled to life, emitting a high-pitched screech before popping and smoking. Financial status is irrelevant to respect, Lachlan stated. You abandoned her because her values did not align with your temporary appetites. That is not a business decision. That is a failure of character. Ethan gaped. Who do you think you are, Dr. Phil? I am someone who understands the concept of value, Lachlan continued, his voice dropping an octave. You viewed her as an asset to be liquidated when she became inconvenient. That is poor management. It shows a deficit in long-term planning. What? Ethan looked confused. Furthermore, Lachlan stepped closer, looming over the smaller alpha. You are trespassing. If you do not vacate these premises in 10 seconds, I will be forced to physically remove you. And given my wiring issues, I cannot guarantee the structural integrity of your facial features. Ethan looked at Lachlan's bruised knuckles. He looked at the smoking radio. He looked at the sheer size of the man standing before him. He swallowed hard. Fine, Ethan spat, backing toward the door. Keep your charity case, Talia. You deserve each other. You're both freaks. He slammed the door behind him. Silence descended on the apartment. I stared at the door, then at Lachlan. Wiring issues? I asked, a smile tugging at the corner of my lips. Lachlan exhaled, his shoulders slumping slightly. It seemed appropriate. Did I overstep? Overstep? I laughed, a genuine bell-like sound. John, you just deconstructed him with corporate jargon and threatened to break his face. It was incredibly hot. Lachlan froze. He turned to look at me, his eyes wide. Hot? Yeah, I admitted, feeling my cheeks heat up. Accountability is my love language, remember? And you just held him accountable. Chapter 16. The adrenaline from the confrontation hadn't faded. It had curdled into something else, something thick and sweet and dangerous. Outside, the rain had started again, tapping a gentle rhythm against the glass. Inside, the apartment felt smaller, more intimate. Lachlan was still standing in the middle of the room watching me. The static charge was gone, replaced by a magnetic pull that drew me toward him. You defended me, I said softly, stepping closer. No one has ever done that. Usually people just tell me to be more flexible, to fit in. You should never fit in, Lachlan murmured. He didn't retreat this time. You are distinctive, like a rare artifact. Trying to make you common would be a crime against nature. You and your words, I whispered, shaking my head. For a guy with amnesia, you sure know how to make a girl feel special. I may not remember my name, he said, his voice rough with emotion. But I know what I see. I see you, Talia. He reached out, his large hand cupping my cheek. His thumb brushed over my cheekbone, his skin rough and callous, but his touch impossibly gentle. I leaned into his palm. I couldn't help it. The scent of rain and soap that clung to him was intoxicating in its own way. It wasn't the alpha musk I was biologically wired to crave, but it was him, and that was enough. John, I breathed, my eyes fluttering shut. Talia, he groaned. He lowered his head. I tipped mine back. Our breaths mingled, warm and shaky. I could feel the heat radiating from his chest, could feel the rapid thud of his heart against his ribs, a rhythm that matched my own. His lips brushed mine, just a ghost of a touch, a promise. I gripped the front of his gray hoodie, ready to pull him down, ready to forget about biology and latents and broken radios. Bark, bark, bark! Mochi exploded from under the armchair, racing between our legs in pursuit of an invisible dust bunny. He slammed into Lachlan's shin with a confused yelp, tangling himself in our feet. We sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Mochi! I gasped, looking down at the traitorous corgi, who was now wagging his tail proudly. Lachlan cleared his throat, running a hand through his hair. His ears were bright red. The dog, he stated, his voice tight. He has impeccable timing. He's a menace, I sighed, though my heart was still racing. I should check the mail, or something. It is raining, Lachlan pointed out. Right, I laughed nervously. I'll just go reorganize the spice rack. Stay here. Don't be hot anymore. I fled to the kitchen, leaving Lachlan standing in the living room with a bewildered puppy and a smile that looked dangerously like hope. Chapter 17. The rain had turned from a gentle tap to a torrential downpour, mirroring the storm brewing inside the apartment. It was 2 a.m. on Sunday. Talia was asleep, her breathing steady and audible through the thin bedroom wall. Mochi was snoring softly under the coffee table. Lachlan Graves, the alpha king of the ironclad pack, stood by the window staring into the wet darkness. He was a liability. He knew it. The incident with Ethan was the catalyst. It was only a matter of time before the petty, vindictive alpha heir ran to his father. And once the local pack caught wind that a giant human was hiding in an Omega's apartment, the council would descend. He had to leave. Logic dictated it. Strategy demanded it. But his feet wouldn't move. Every time he thought of walking out the door, a physical pain radiated through his chest, sharper than his healing ribs, deeper than his bruised knuckles. Bzzz. The burner phone he had swiped from the tracker in the hallway vibrated in his pocket. It was a single text from his beta, Elias. Sector 4, Allie, now, or I breach. Lachlan cursed silently. He grabbed the gray crop-top hoodie, which was starting to smell comfortably like him and Talia, and slipped out the window onto the fire escape. The metal groaned under his weight, but he moved with the silent precision of a predator. He dropped into the alleyway below, his boots splashing in a puddle. Elias was waiting in the shadows. His second was soaked, his trench coat clinging to his frame, his face grim. "You look like hell, sire," Elias noted, eyeing the tight hoodie and the mud-stained jeans. "Report," Lachlan ordered, his voice a low growl that was lost in the thunder. The tracker delivered your message about the covert operation, but it didn't hold, Elias said, stepping closer. The council believes you are dead, or worse, feral. They are preparing a vote of no confidence. You have to come back, Lachlan. Tonight. I can't, Lachlan said. Why? Because of the girl? Elias scoffed. She's an Omega, Lachlan, a civilian. If the rogue factions find out she's harboring the king, they won't just kill her. They'll use her to break you. Lachlan slammed his fist into the brick wall next to Elias's head. A spiderweb of cracks appeared in the masonry. She is not just an Omega. She is my mate. Elias froze. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead as he processed the information. You found her? Here? She hit me with her car, Lachlan admitted, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. She thinks I have amnesia. She thinks I am a human with a wiring problem. Amnesia? Elias rubbed his temples. Sire, this is a farce. You are building a foundation on quicksand. You have to tell her, or you have to leave her. I will tell her, Lachlan promised, looking up at the dark window of the third-floor apartment. But not yet. She needs protection from Ethan's pack first. Give me 24 hours, then I will return. Elias looked at his king, then sighed, handing him a thick envelope. Cash, untraceable currency. If you're going to play house, at least pay for your own food. That Omega probably can't afford your calorie intake. Lachlan took the pouch. 24 hours, Elias. Then I'm gone. Chapter 18. Sunday morning arrived with a deceptive calm. The rain had stopped, leaving the sky a bruised purple. I woke up feeling groggy, but strangely energized. The memory of the almost kiss was still buzzing in my veins like caffeine. John, I called out, walking into the living room. The apartment was empty. The emerald sofa was neatly made up, the duvet folded with that military precision that was starting to unnerve me. Mochi? I looked around. The puppy was chewing on a table leg. Where's the giant? A note was on the counter, written on the back of a utility bill in sharp, angular handwriting. Gone to find breakfast. Will return. Jay. He has handwriting like a doctor, I muttered, crumpling the note. Or a serial killer. I decided to channel my nervous energy into cleaning. The apartment was a disaster zone of dog toys and man-sized footprints. I gathered the laundry, grabbing the towels Lachlan had used. As I shook out the duvet he slept on, something heavy and metallic clattered to the hardwood floor. Clink. I frowned, bending down to pick it up. It was a ring. Not just a ring, a signet ring. It was massive, made of heavy, dull gold that felt warm in my palm. The face of the ring was engraved with a crest I didn't recognize immediately. A wolf's head superimposed over a shield, with a sword running through the center. What on earth? I whispered, turning it over. Inside the band, there was an inscription. The letters were tiny, worn down by time but legible. Ironclad, Veritas, Vincit. My blood ran cold. Ironclad. He said he didn't know the pack, I whispered to the empty room. He said he just read the folder on my desk. My mind raced. Why would a homeless man with amnesia have a ring with the Ironclad pack motto? Did he steal it? Was he a thief on the run? That would explain the lack of ID and the tracker from last night. I ran to my laptop, my fingers trembling as I typed Ironclad pack crest into the search bar. Hundreds of images popped up. The wolf and shield. It was the official seal of the pack. I scrolled down. I clicked on a news article from 3 years ago titled, "The Reclusive King, Alpha Lachlan Graves Ascends to the Throne." The photo was grainy, taken from a distance at a press conference. The man in the photo was younger, clean-shaven, and wearing a suit that looked terrifyingly expensive. But the eyes... I zoomed in. Even in the pixelated image, the eyes were dark, intense, and stoic. And on his right hand, resting on the podium, was a heavy gold signet ring. I looked at the ring in my palm. I looked at the screen. The air left my lungs like I'd been punched in the stomach. "He's not a latent," I whispered, the betrayal tasting like bile in my throat. "He's not a thief." I stared at the ring, the pieces of the puzzle slamming together with violent force. The strength, the corporate speak, the arrogance, the way he dismantled Ethan. He's the king. Chapter 19. I was sitting on the emerald sofa when he came back, the ring clenched in my fist, hidden inside the pocket of my cardigan. The lock clicked. The door opened. Lachlan stepped inside, carrying a brown paper bag that smelled of fresh pastries. He looked better. His color had returned, and the bruise on his knuckles had faded to a light yellow. He had also changed. Gone was my stretched-out gray hoodie. In its place, he wore a plain black t-shirt that strained against his chest, likely a cheap purchase from the corner store, but it made him look dangerously more like a king and less like a squatter. "I acquired sustenance," he announced, holding up the bag. "And a garment that fits." He gestured to the t-shirt, then back to the bag. "Croissants. I believe they are acceptable breakfast items." He looked at me, and his smile faltered. He sensed the shift in the air. My scent must have been sour with distress, though I tried to mask it. "Talia?" He closed the door, locking it. "Is something wrong? Did Ethan return?" "No," I said, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears. "Ethan didn't come back." I stood up. I should scream at him. I should throw the ring at his head and demand he leave. But my heart was warring with my brain. My brain screamed, "Liar!" But my heart whispered, "Protector." "I was thinking about yesterday," I lied, stepping closer to him. I needed to know. I needed to see if he would tell me the truth before I forced it out of him. "About what you said, that you'd burn the world down?" Lachlan dropped the bag of croissants on the table. He closed the distance between us in 2 strides. The static charge returned, making the hair on my arm stand up. "I meant it," he rasped, staring down at me. "I don't know who I was before the accident, Talia, but I know who I am when I'm with you." "And who is that?" I asked, looking up into those black eyes. "Yours," he breathed. He didn't wait this time. He cupped my face with both hands, his thumbs tracing my cheekbones, and crashed his lips onto mine. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was an explosion. The moment our lips touched, a literal spark zipped between us, stinging and electric. He groaned, a low rumble in his chest that vibrated against my ribs. His mouth was hot, demanding, tasting of rain and desperation. I gasped, and he used the opportunity to deepen the kiss, his tongue sweeping into my mouth, claiming me. It was overwhelming. It was intoxicating. It felt like standing in the center of a thunderstorm. Pop! The bulb in the hallway lamp exploded, showering sparks onto the floor. Neither of us flinched. I gripped the front of his gray hoodie, pulling him closer, drowning in the sensation of him. For a moment, I forgot the ring in my pocket. I forgot the lie. I just wanted this. I wanted the fire. He pulled back slightly, resting his forehead against mine, both of us gasping for air. His eyes were blown wide, completely black. "Talia," he whispered, his voice wrecked. I love you. I don't care about my past. I only want this future. It was a beautiful lie, and it broke my heart. Chapter 20. I pulled away from him. It took every ounce of strength I had, but I stepped back, putting 3 feet of cold distance between us. Lachlan looked confused. He reached for me, his hand hovering in the air. Talia? Don't, I said, my voice trembling. Don't tell me you love me. Not when you don't even respect me enough to tell me your name. He froze. The passion drained from his face, replaced by a guarded, stoic mask. I told you. I don't remember. Stop it! I shouted, the tears finally spilling over. Stop lying! You remember everything! You've remembered it the whole time! Talia, you're not making sense, he said, taking a step forward. The accident. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ring. I held it up, the gold glinting in the dim light of the apartment. Lachlan stopped dead. His eyes fixed on the ring, and I saw the color drain from his face. He didn't look like a king in that moment. He looked like a man watching his world crumble. I found it in the duvet, I said, my voice shaking. Ironclad. Veritas vincit. Truth conquers. That's rich coming from you. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't try to deny it. He knew I knew. You're not John Doe, I whispered. And you're not a latent with bad wiring. You're Lachlan Graves, the Alpha King. He exhaled, a long, heavy sigh that seemed to deflate his massive frame. He straightened his spine, the stoop of the confused amnesiac vanishing. In its place stood a warrior, a ruler. Yes, he said simply. The gravel in his voice was gone, replaced by a commanding baritone. Why? I asked, a tear rolling down my cheek. Why lie? Why play house in my tiny apartment? Why let me worry about feeding you and buying you clothes when you could buy this whole building? Because, he said, and the pain in his voice was real. For the last 5 years, my life has been gray, colorless, tasteless. I was a machine, Talia, a weapon for the pack. He took a step toward me, desperation seeping back into his expression. When I hit your car, when I smelled you, the world came back. You brought the color back. I knew if I told you who I was, if I told you that you were the mate of a feral king, you would run. You would hate me. So you manipulated me instead? I snapped, clutching the ring so hard it cut into my palm. You let me believe I was helping a vulnerable human. You invaded my home. You made me care about a lie. The feelings were not a lie, he roared, the lights flickering violently overhead. The way I feel about you is the only truth I have. Get out, I whispered, pointing at the door. Talia, please, get out, I screamed. Take your ring, take your lies, and get out of my house. Lachlan stared at me for a long, agonizing moment. He looked at the ring in my hand, then at my tear-stained face. He realized he had lost. He stepped forward, gently taking the ring from my palm. His fingers lingered on mine for a second, one last spark, before he pulled away. I will go, he said, his voice quiet and deadly calm. But this isn't over. You are my mate, Talia Reed, and I do not give up what is mine. He turned and walked out the door, taking all the warmth in the world with him. Chapter 21. The silence that followed Lachlan's departure was heavier than his presence ever was. It settled over the apartment like a thick, suffocating blanket, pressing against my eardrums. I stared at the closed door. The deadbolt was engaged. I had locked it automatically after he left, a muscle memory that felt like a betrayal. "He's gone, Mochi," I whispered. My voice cracked. Under the coffee table, Mochi let out a confused whine. He crawled out, his claws clicking on the hardwood floor, and trotted to the emerald velvet sofa. He sniffed the cushions, searching for the giant who had fed him steak and scratched him behind the ears. Finding nothing but lingering static, Mochi looked at me with wide, accusatory eyes. "Don't look at me like that," I snapped, wiping my cheeks aggressively. "He lied to us. He was the king, Mochi, the Alpha King. And he played house in our living room like it was a vacation." I moved through the apartment like a whirlwind, driven by a frantic need to erase him. I couldn't stand the reminders. I grabbed the duvet he had slept in. It still held the shape of his body, a ghost of the man who had held me during his nightmares. I bundled it up, stuffing it into the linen closet and slamming the door shut. I marched to the kitchen. The cast iron skillet was still on the stove, congealed grease pooling in the bottom. I scrubbed it until my knuckles turned white. Then I saw the radio. It was sitting on the counter, smoke-stained and silent. The plastic casing was warped from the electrical surge he had caused when he got jealous. I reached out to touch it, running my finger over the melted volume knob. "I am the kind of trouble that would burn the world down to keep you warm." "Liar," I hissed. I grabbed a trash bag to throw the radio away, but my hand hovered over the bin. I couldn't do it. It was broken, useless, and ugly, but it was proof. Proof that he hadn't just been a hallucination. Proof that for a few days, someone powerful had lost control because of me. I left the radio on the counter. I went to my bedroom to change. I felt exposed, raw. I reached for my favorite comfort item, my oversized gray hoodie, the one I lived in on rainy Sundays. I checked the hook on the door. Empty. I checked the floor. Empty. I checked the hamper. Empty. I froze. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat. "He stole my hoodie," I said aloud, staring at the empty hook. The Alpha King of the Ironclad Pack, a man who could probably buy a textile factory with his pocket change, had stolen my $10 crop top hoodie. I slid down the doorframe, pulling my knees to my chest. The anger finally gave way to the desolation I had been holding back. The apartment was clean. The intruder was gone. I was safe. And I had never felt more alone in my life. Chapter 22. The Penthouse of the Obsidian Tower, formerly known as the Ironclad Spire, was a masterpiece of modern architecture. It was glass, steel, and black marble. It was efficient, expensive, and completely devoid of life. Lachlan Graves stood in the center of the massive living room, staring out at the city skyline. To anyone else, the view was breathtaking, a panoramic tapestry of city lights shimmering in the rain. To Lachlan, it was gray. The moment he had stepped out of Talia's building, the color had started to bleed from the world. The red taillights of the cars faded to ash. The yellow street lamps turned to pale chalk. By the time he reached the penthouse, his sensory dormancy had returned with a vengeance. He took a breath. The air in the penthouse was filtered and pure. It smelled of nothing. He walked to the wet bar and poured himself a glass of whiskey. He drank it. It tasted like water. "Sire?" Elias, his beta, stood by the elevator looking uncomfortable. "The council has been informed of your return. They are relieved, though they are asking questions about your attire." Lachlan looked down at himself. He was still wearing the mud-stained jeans from the alleyway, and clinging to his massive chest, straining at the seams, was a gray, women's crop-top hoodie. It exposed his midriff, the sleeves barely past his elbows. It looked ridiculous. "Tell the council to file a grievance," Lachlan rasped. His voice sounded dead to his own ears, a monotone drone. "Lachlan." Elias stepped closer, concern etching his features. "You need to change. You need to eat. You look like I'm withdrawing," Lachlan finished. He rubbed his chest. The physical pain was a dull, constant ache, like a hook buried in his heart, tugging him back toward the third-floor walk-up in Oak Haven. He lifted his arm, burying his nose in the fabric of the gray hoodie. There. Faint, fading, but there. Vanilla. Rain. Old books. For a second, a spark of color returned to his vision. The amber liquid in his glass glowed gold. Then, as he lowered his arm, the world snapped back to monochrome gray. "I can't take it off," Lachlan whispered, realizing the horror of his situation. "It is the only thing that anchors me." "This is unsustainable," Elias warned. "You are the king. You cannot rule while wearing a teenager sweatshirt and starving yourself." "I am not starving," Lachlan lied. He set the glass down. "Bring me her file, Elias. Everything. Her debts, her contracts, her clients. If I cannot be with her, I will secure her existence from afar." "Groveling by proxy?" Elias asked, raising an eyebrow. Lachlan turned to the window, watching the gray rain fall on the gray city. "It is not groveling, Elias. It is restitution." Chapter 23. Monday morning was a blur of gray meetings and silent agony. Lachlan sat at the head of the obsidian conference table, wearing a tailored black suit. Under the suit jacket, hidden from view, he wore the gray hoodie. It was uncomfortable, bunching up under his arms, but he refused to remove it. Elias slid a tablet across the table. "The dossiers you requested," Elias said. "Talia Reed, sole proprietor of Reed Interiors. Financial status, critical." Lachlan frowned, scrolling through the data. It was worse than he thought. The accident had been the tipping point. The repairs for her Volkswagen Beetle were going to be financially ruinous. Her business credit card was maxed out from buying materials for a client who had stiffed her on the payment. She was surviving on ramen noodles and stubbornness. "She is drowning," Lachlan murmured. The numbers on the screen were black and white, but they painted a picture of struggle that made his wolf pace aggressively in his mind. "She has a balance of $8,200 on her business visa," Elias noted, "and a backlog of vendor payments totaling another $4,000. "Pay it," Lachlan ordered. "Sire, if you just pay it, she will know," Elias warned. "You told me she has pride. If the Alpha King suddenly writes her a check, she will tear it up and mail you the confetti. She wants accountability, not charity." Lachlan tapped his finger on the glass table. Elias was right. Talia was fierce. She would see a direct payment as a manipulation, another way to control her. "Make it an error," Lachlan said slowly. "A bank reconciliation error. Or an anonymous grant. Small business relief fund. Create the fund if you have to." Elias typed on his own tablet. "I can route it through a shell corporation, Sentinel Holdings. We can classify it as a vendor overpayment refund for the client who stiffed her. It will look like a legal settlement." "Do it," Lachlan said. "Directly pay off the visa and the vendor backlog. Then wire her a surplus. $20,000. $20,000 is suspicious for a refund," Elias countered. "Fine, $15,000. Just fix it." Talia's apartment. I was staring at my laptop screen, trying to figure out which bill to pay first, the electricity or the internet. If I paid the internet, I could keep working. If I paid the electricity, I could keep the fridge running. Ping! An email notification popped up. Subject: Notice of Settlement Payment, J. Gable Renovations. I frowned. Mrs. Gable? She had fired me last week over the beige swatch incident. Why would I be getting a settlement? I opened the banking app. My hand flew to my mouth. Available balance, $15,240. The negative red numbers that usually mocked me were gone. The credit card balance was zero. The vendor backlog was zero. What? I whispered. I refreshed the page. The numbers stayed. I read the email again. Due to a clerical error in the final contract adjustment, Reed Interiors was undercompensated. We have directly settled all outstanding vendor and credit balances on your behalf. Additionally, please accept this immediate wire transfer as a final balance correction. It didn't make sense. Mrs. Gable was cheap. She counted pennies. She wouldn't send $15,000 because of a clerical error. I stared at the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was it him? I looked at the broken radio on the counter. No, I reasoned. He's a king. Kings don't handle clerical errors. And he left. He took his ring and he left. But as I looked at the green numbers, the relief washed over me so hard I almost cried. I could pay rent. I could fix the green bean. I could breathe. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. Okay, I don't care where it came from. I'm taking it. Chapter 24. 2 days passed. The money was real. I had paid off the visa and booked the mechanic for the Beetle, but the silence in the apartment was still deafening. I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the fact that every time the floorboards creaked, I hoped it was a giant man breaking into my house to eat my groceries. On Wednesday afternoon, another email arrived. Subject: Request for Proposal, Ironclad Heritage Site. I froze. My coffee cup hovered halfway to my mouth. Ironclad. I opened the email. It wasn't from a shell corporation this time. It was official. The letterhead featured the wolf and shield crest, the same one that had been on the ring. Dear Ms. Reed, the Ironclad Pack Council is accepting bids for the restoration of the old pack house, a heritage site located in the North Sector. We require a designer with a specific appreciation for traditional aesthetics and historical preservation. Your portfolio was recommended to us. We are inviting you to submit a proposal. The budget is open. Sincerely, Elias Vane, Head of Operations. I stared at the name. Elias, not Lachlan. My first instinct was to delete it, to slam the laptop shut and scream. This was him. This was Lachlan pulling strings, trying to buy his way back into my life. He thinks he can just hire me? I fumed, standing up to pace the small living room. Mochi watched me, his head tilted. He lies to my face, breaks my heart, steals my hoodie, and then offers me a job? I walked to the window, looking out at the rainy street. But then I read the email again. Traditional aesthetics. Historical preservation. My old pack had kicked me out because I was too traditional, because I didn't fit their modern, fast-paced mold. Lachlan, John, had listened to that story. He remembered. He wasn't offering me charity this time. He was offering me the one thing I had always wanted: validation for my style. A job where my antiquated views were an asset, not a liability. And the budget was open. I looked at the broken radio. I looked at the empty hook where my hoodie used to be. If I took the job, I would have to deal with the ironclad pack. I might have to see him. Good, I whispered, a spark of anger and something hotter igniting in my chest. Let him see me. Let him see me fix his house while he broke mine. I'll take his money. I'll do the job perfectly. And I won't let him see me cry once. I sat back down at the computer. I cracked my knuckles. 2. Elias Vane. Subject, Request for proposal. Mr. Vane, I accept the invitation to bid. However, my consultation fee has doubled as of this morning. Attached is my rate sheet. See you on Monday. Talia Reed. I hit send. I wasn't running anymore. If the Alpha King wanted a professional, he was going to get one. And she was going to be the most expensive mistake he ever made. Chapter 25. Monday morning arrived with a vengeance. The sky over Oakhaven was a bruised purple, threatening another storm, which felt entirely appropriate for my mood. I parked the green bean in front of the old pack house. It was a sprawling Victorian mansion that had clearly seen better days. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged like a tired jaw, and the windows were boarded up with plywood. But the bones were magnificent. Okay, Mochi, I said, turning to the passenger seat. Ground rules. You are a professional sight dog today. Do not eat the drywall. Do not pee on the Alpha King. Mochi yipped, wagging his tail. My usual dog sitter had the flu, so the chaos potato was coming with me. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I was wearing my armor, high-waisted trousers, a silk blouse, and a trench coat that made me feel like a noir detective. I looked expensive. I looked capable. I looked like I didn't cry over men who stole my hoodies. I stepped out, clipping Mochi's leash. A man was waiting by the gate. He was tall, wearing a sharp suit and holding a tablet. This had to be Elias. Ms. Reed, Elias said, extending a hand. He looked exhausted. Thank you for coming on such short notice, and for the revised fee structure. My expertise comes at a premium, I said smoothly, shaking his hand. This is Mochi. He's my structural integrity consultant. Elias cracked a weary smile. Right. The Alpha is inside. He insisted on overseeing the initial walkthrough. My stomach did a traitorous flip. Of course. Lead the way. We walked up the crumbling path. The front doors were massive oak slabs, carved with the same wolf and shield crest I had seen on the ring. Elias pushed them open. The foyer was cavernous. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light cutting through the boards. And there, standing in the center of the room like a statue carved from obsidian, was Lachlan. He was wearing a black suit that radiated obscene luxury. His back was to us, his shoulders broad and tense. "Sire," Elias called out, "the contractor is here." Lachlan turned. The effect was instantaneous. As his eyes locked onto mine, he physically stumbled, grabbing the grand staircase banister for support. His pupils dilated, swallowing the iris until his eyes were entirely black. He took a sharp, ragged breath, as if the air in the room had suddenly changed composition. For him, I realized with a jolt, it probably had. He had gone from a gray world back to Technicolor in a heartbeat. "Ms. Reed," he rasped. His voice was deeper than I remembered, vibrating through the floorboards. "Mr. Graves," I replied, my voice cool and professional. I didn't offer my hand. "Shall we discuss the load-bearing walls? Or are you going to faint?" Lachlan straightened, smoothing his tie. He looked at me with a hunger that made my knees weak, but he kept his distance. I am acclimating. The lighting in here is intense. It's dust, I corrected, pulling out my laser tape measure. Let's get started. I charge by the hour, and I round up. Chapter 26. The walkthrough was a torture session of repressed longing. Every time I pointed to a cornice or a rotting floorboard, Lachlan was there, hovering just inside my personal space. The scent of him, rain, expensive wool, and that underlying static charge was driving my Omega instincts haywire. Mochi, traitor that he was, kept trying to chew Lachlan's Italian leather shoes. The structural integrity of the West Wing is compromised, I said, pointing my laser at the ceiling. You'll need to reinforce the beams before we can even think about aesthetics. Do whatever is required, Lachlan said, watching my hands instead of the ceiling. The budget is open. Must be nice, I muttered, marking a spot on my clipboard. We moved to the back of the house where the old solarium opened out onto the overgrown garden. The air here was heavy, silent, too silent. Lachlan stopped abruptly. His head snapped toward the garden. A low growl started in his chest, a sound I recognized from the grocery store. Get down, he ordered. Excuse me? I bristled. I am not... Crash. The glass of the solarium shattered inward. 3 men burst through the broken frame, wearing tactical gear and masks. They didn't look like contractors. They smelled like rot and rogue wolf musk. Target acquired, one shouted, raising a heavy baton. Elias, secure the perimeter, Lachlan roared, shoving me behind him. The change was terrifying. The stoic king vanished. In his place was a whirlwind of violence. Lachlan didn't shift. There wasn't time. But he moved with a speed that blurred the eye. He caught the first attacker's baton mid-swing, snapping the wood like a twig, and threw the man through the remaining glass pane. Talia, run! He shouted, blocking a blow from the second attacker. I am not leaving my dog! I yelled. Mochi was barking furiously at a third man who was flanking us. The third man lunged for me. I didn't think. I reacted. I swung my heavy metal clipboard with all my strength, catching him square in the nose. He howled, clutching his face. Nice swing, Lachlan grunted, kicking the second man into a pillar, but there were more. Shadows were moving in the garden. This wasn't a random attack. It was an assassination attempt. They're swarming, Lachlan snarled. His eyes were fully black, his canines lengthening. Talia, get behind the pillar, now! He grabbed the lapels of his expensive suit jacket and ripped it off, tossing it aside to free his movement. And then I saw it. Underneath the bespoke Italian suit, underneath the white dress shirt which had torn down the back, he was wearing a gray women's crop top hoodie. It was tight. It was ridiculous. It barely covered his ribs. It was mine. Chapter 27. The sight of the Alpha King fighting off assassins while wearing my tiny $10 hoodie broke my brain. It was absurd. It was hilarious. It was the most romantic thing I had ever seen. The fight was over quickly. Elias arrived with the pack enforcers, and the rogues were subdued. The solarium was a wreck of shattered glass and splintered wood. Lachlan stood in the center of the chaos, breathing hard. His knuckles were bloody again. His dress shirt was in ribbons, hanging off his frame, revealing the gray hoodie underneath in all its glory. He turned to me, panic wild in his eyes. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? I stared at him. I walked over, stepping over the debris. Mochi trotted beside me, looking proud of himself. You're wearing it, I whispered, pointing at his chest. Lachlan looked down. He seemed to realize for the first time that his jacket was gone, and his secret was exposed. A flush of red crept up his neck, darker than the blood on his hands. He tried to cover the crop top with his shredded arms. It was cold in the penthouse. It's a crop top, Lachlan, I said, a hysterical giggle escaping me. It doesn't even cover your kidneys. It offers 0 thermal protection. He slumped, the adrenaline leaving him. It smelled like you, he admitted, his voice quiet. When I left, the world went gray again. The food tasted like ash. The only time I could see color, the only time I could feel anything, was when I had this ridiculous garment against my skin. He looked at me, his black eyes vulnerable. I didn't steal it to be petty, Talia. I stole it because I was terrified I would forget the color of your eyes. My heart cracked open. All the anger, all the pride, all the hurt, it evaporated. You idiot, I whispered, stepping closer. You could have just asked for the hoodie. Or, stayed. I thought I was protecting you, he said. From this. He gestured to the broken glass and the unconscious rogues. I am a target. I didn't want you in the crossfire. I broke a guy's nose with a clipboard, I reminded him. I can handle a little crossfire. What I can't handle is a liar. I reached out and took his hand, the one with the bruised knuckles. You owe me a new hoodie, I said, and a new clipboard, and a very, very long explanation. Lachlan squeezed my hand, pulling me into his chest. He buried his face in my hair, inhaling deeply. I will buy you 1,000 hoodies. I will buy you a textile factory. Just don't leave. I'm not going anywhere, I murmured into the gray fabric. I have a contract to fulfill, and I charge overtime for assassination attempts. Chapter 28, 1 month later. The renovation of the old pack house was ahead of schedule. The structural reinforcements were done, and the aesthetic restoration had begun. But the most important project was happening in the park across the street. Pick it up, I ordered, sitting on a bench with a latte. Lachlan Graves, the Alpha King, sighed. He was wearing jeans, new ones, and a t-shirt that fit properly. He held a small, biodegradable green bag. Mochi sat by his feet, looking innocent. This is beneath my station, Lachlan grumbled, bending down to scoop up the poop. Accountability, Your Majesty, I chirped. You wanted a relationship. Part of the relationship is walking the dog, and walking the dog includes the poop. Lachlan tied the bag and tossed it into the bin with perfect aim. He walked over to the bench, wiping his hands on a sanitizer wipe. I could have my beta do this, he muttered, sitting down next to me. Elias is busy running your empire while you play house husband, I teased, leaning my head on his shoulder. Lachlan wrapped his arm around me. The static was still there, a constant low hum that made me feel safe. He smelled like cedar and rain now, the sensory dormancy completely gone as long as I was near. I prefer this empire, he said, kissing the top of my head. It has better fringe benefits. Oh yeah? I looked up at him. Like what? Like color, he said softly, and flavor. And you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I froze. Lachlan, if that is a ring, I am going to hit you with my latte. It's been a month. He laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that I felt in my toes. It is not a ring, not yet. I know you, Talia. You want slow. You want traditional. He opened the box. Inside was a silver locket. It was simple, elegant, and heavy. I opened it. Inside was a tiny, folded picture of Mochi sleeping on the emerald sofa, and opposite it, a picture of Lachlan and me, taken on his phone the day after the attack, both of us covered in dust and smiling like idiots. "A placeholder," he whispered, "until you are ready for the signet ring." I felt tears prick my eyes. It was perfect. It was thoughtful. It was human. "I love it," I whispered. "I love you," he said, and this time there were no flickering lights, no exploding radios, just the steady beat of his heart against mine. "I know," I smiled, closing the locket. "Now come on. Mochi found a squirrel. If you don't catch him, you're explaining it to the park ranger." Lachlan groaned, standing up. "I am the king of the ironclad pack. I fear no man." "Bark!" Mochi took off toward a tree. "Mochi, halt!" Lachlan shouted, sprinting after the corgi. I sat back on the bench, watching the two loves of my life run in circles under the sun. The world was bright. The colors were vivid. And for the first time in a long time, everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. The end. Quick favor, don't go anywhere yet. If you thought Talia was brave for forcing the Alpha King into a crop top hoodie, wait until you meet the heroine in this next story on your screen. You have to hear this disaster unfold. Click the video on your screen right now. It is absolutely unhinged.